It's Wednesday, March 2nd, and this is now on HNN.
Tragedy after tragedy, yeah.
An investigation underway right now into what caused a damaging house fire in Waipahu. An update on the victims and the back-to-back tragedies they have faced.
Intense bombing continued overnight as Russia's war with Ukraine intensifies. I'm Deborah Alfarone in Washington, where President Biden is vowing that President Vladimir Putin will pay a price for his invasion of Ukraine.
The pandemic is not over.
Governor Ige sets an end date for the Safe Travels program, but says he hasn't made a decision on lifting the mask mandate yet.
She hates it.
These stories, plus The Rock makes a visit to the Honolulu Zoo, and at least one animal was not a fan. We'll explain coming up on This Is Now.
Good afternoon. Thanks for watching. This is Now. I'm Jonathan. So good to be back with you here in the HNN Digital Center alongside Ashley. Got to get started with some developing news.
That's right. Russia and Ukraine both say they are ready to resume talks to end the bloody war. But for now, nothing has been scheduled, and the assault on Ukraine continues. Deborah Alfarone has the latest.
Residents of a southeastern Ukraine city formed a human blockade to keep Russian forces out as airstrikes and heavy shelling continued Wednesday in several other cities throughout the country.
We've seen videos of Russian forces moving exceptionally lethal weaponry into Ukraine. That includes cluster munitions and vacuum bombs, which are banned under the Geneva Convention.
Wednesday, the United Nations General Assembly adopted a non-binding resolution condemning Russia and demanding its withdrawal from Ukraine. On Capitol Hill, Senator Lindsey Graham announced plans to introduce a resolution pushing for a war crimes investigation into Russian President Vladimir Putin.
I'm hoping that Republicans and Democrats will speak with one voice when it comes to the rule of law, that what Putin is doing is a war crime.
Today, President Biden told reporters it's too early to tell whether Mr. Putin is guilty of war crimes in Ukraine, but he did say that a future ban on Russian oil imports is not necessarily off the table.
We're looking very closely at what's happening in Ukraine right now, including what's happening to civilians. We're taking account of it, we're documenting it, and we want to ensure, among other things, that there's accountability for it.
The Biden administration has announced additional sanctions targeting both Russia and Belarus's military and certain technology exports, while the Justice Department launched a task force to crack down on Russian oligarchs and others who try to evade U.S. sanctions. Deborah Alfarone, CBS News, the White House.
It's important for us to show the nation we can come together and do big things. So tonight I'm offering a unity agenda for the nation.
Now, President Biden held his first State of the Union address last night, and to help break it all down for us, we're joined now by Hawaii News Now's Chief National Political Analyst, Greta Van Susteren. Now, Greta, what has been the initial reaction to the president's speech so far?
Well, as you might imagine, the Democrats were quite pleased, and the Republicans thought it was awful. I mean, we are a very divided country and a very divided city. So the president went up there. He had a heavy lift because there are a lot of things going on in the world right now. He has inflation to deal with. His signature program, Build Back Better, did not get passed. It's not going to get passed, so we had to deal with that. Plus, we've got the problem with the war with Russia invading Ukraine. So he had a lot of things to talk about. He had a couple gaffes that some Republicans have seized upon, but since I have had gaffes myself, saying the wrong word at the wrong time, is that I live in a glass house, so I'm not going to complain. But looking at it substantively, he spent a lot of time on Ukraine. But at the tail end of his speech, he said, the State of the Union is strong. Well, American people may not quite be feeling that. It might be overstating it with gasoline prices so high and with the threat that Putin is posing not just to Ukraine but to the world. So I think that he tried to put a really good spin on a bad situation, and I think think for that reason, I think he probably did a pretty good job. But overall, the Republicans, pointed out that this is right now the country is not doing particularly well in a lot of areas like inflation, immigration. So it depends on. So the short answer is who. It depends on who you talk to, how he did.
Right, and as you mentioned, lots going on. Our nation is facing so much right now at home and abroad. Did he really lay out a plan on how he's going to address those challenges?
Well, not particular plan, but it's hard to be sort of specific right now because there's so much going on. I mean, he did talk about sort of a scaled down version of Build Back Better. He talked about prescription drugs, lowering the prices on prescription drugs. So he did some sort of things that more people can agree on. He talked about he's not going to defund the police. Crime is rising in this country. So he did say that. Now that may be unattractive to some people in the far left of his party, not his entire party, but in the far left of his party. In terms of climate change, he's getting criticism from the far left in his party saying he didn't go far enough. So, he tried to keep everybody a little bit happy, but it's really hard to keep everybody happy. Now, the good news for the president is the State of the Union, which is constitutionally mandated that he report the State of the Union to Congress, is that once it's over, it is now over. It fades very quickly, and especially when we've got the war in Ukraine that immediately grabs all the headlines. So it's really sort of a 24-hour news cycle at most. And in terms of whether he laid out any big changes in this country, the answer is no. He's still hoping to sort of get something done in terms of a social infrastructure, but it's going to be very difficult for him to get that done.
Yeah, and Greta, he did touch on a lot of topics and issues in his speech. But was there anything missing? Did we feel like we should have heard more from him about something?
I don't think so. Look, he's dancing a fine line. Things are tough. You go to the gas tank, and you're paying $3, $4, $5 a gallon depending on where you live. That's tough. He's got the problem that we poured a lot of money into the economy a year ago in the stimulus program in order to get the economy up and running because people couldn't work or couldn't find work or there's COVID scare, you had the pandemic. But the problem is that when you pour a lot of money into the economy in order to fix that problem, you overheat the economy and you get something called inflation. So he's got that problem. It's almost like, and this isn't just true of this president, but when you're president in a time of crisis, every time you try to fix something, you're likely to create a bit different problem. And so even now, what's the right answer with Ukraine? We're all sitting here watching what's happening in Ukraine. What's the right answer? Should the U.S. get really involved in it or not get involved in it at all? Should we just supply them or not? And usually problems of that magnitude, even problems with the economy and COVID, you only learn the right answer long after it's over. And that's a rough time to try to figure out the right answer. So he's got a very tough problem on his hands. A lot of it he may have created himself. He said he's going to have this great strategy when he ran for president in order to solve the pandemic. Well, we know that hasn't been solved. That may not be his fault, but he certainly oversold what he could do. So he's got some political problems, based on what he said in the election. But he's got, but look, this president has a tough time. Last president did, the other president did before. It's tough to be president, but you have a real problem when you overpromise when you run for president. Look, he has problems within his own party. He couldn't get the Voting Rights Act passed, and when he said that he was going to get that done, that was supposed to happen in January. Well, he didn't get that done. He said he was going to get Build Back Better passed. Well, he didn't get that done. Well, what about immigration? What about the mask policy? The CDC has had very inconsistent statements about how we handle the pandemic. Well, that's a problem for him. He's not the one at the CDC making those decisions, releasing those statements, but he is the president, so he's responsible. So he right now is not an easy time for this president.
Absolutely. All right. Hawaii News Now's Chief National Political Analyst, Greta Van Susteren. Appreciate your time, Greta.
Right now, HFD investigating an overnight house fire in Waipahu. Some interesting details coming out of this case. Casey Lund brings us the latest.
A very tragic day for that family. There were a total of 6 people who called this house home. There were 2 men inside the home at the time the fire started. They were able to make it out safely, and HFD credits that to the working smoke detectors they had inside. But you can see how hot this fire burned, tearing through the walls, destroying that vehicle that was parked in the garage. Those 2 men, a 76-year-old man and a 55-year-old man, a grandfather of the family and his son, were able to get out okay. We talked to the mother of this family, though, about what she heard when she got the call that her house was on fire early this morning.
I received a call from my husband like about 1:30, saying that the house was on fire, and I was like, what? And I just pulled up, and I was just shocked because how quick it happened, you know? Like, when I pulled up, the flames were all over the garage, and the garage was sunk in, crackling, like things were just all burning up in flames in there.
HFD got on scene here just about 8 minutes after that first call into 911. They were able to have the fire completely put out around 2:10 this morning. Now that family that lives in this home already went through a really difficult time. Just a couple of weeks ago, the daughter who lives here was engaged to the young man, the 27-year-old man who so many know as Jay, who was shot and killed on February 13th in Honowai Park.
Tragedy after tragedy, yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about what you guys have been through?
Yeah, and so we just recently had a candlelight vigil on Sunday, which was so nice and everything. We had lost a dear loved one, which was my daughter's fiance. I still call him my son. He's been with us for the past 7-8 years.
Police are still searching for a suspect in that shooting case. If you have any information, you're asked to call Crime Stoppers. Back out here in Waipahu, that family says they are grateful for their loved ones and their neighbors who stepped in to support them during this difficult time. The American Red Cross also offered assistance through housing and other resources. We do know that those two gentlemen that were able to get out of this house safely were treated for minor smoke inhalation but didn't have to be taken to the hospital. Reporting in Waipahu, I'm Casey Lund. Now back to you.
And we've got this update for you. Governor Ige says the state's safe travel program for domestic trans-Pacific travelers will end on March 25th.
Passengers arriving from any domestic destination will not have to show proof of vaccination or a pre-travel test.
And Ige also said he isn't ready to lift the state's indoor mask mandate, standing alone among the nation's 50 governors. Instead, Ige said he'll make a decision in the coming month on continuing to require masks indoors, allowing for the possibility that the mandate could remain in place until April.
The state of Hawaii is the only statewide public school system, and so we are working with the public schools about mask requirements. We're the only state that runs the jails, and we're the only state that manages all of the hospitals in the counties as well. So our situation in Hawaii is more complex than other areas.
And while he was dropping other restrictions, he's still urging residents to continue to take precautions.
The pandemic is not over. Tragically, we continue to see those that we know and love continue to suffer from COVID-19. I want to emphasize this: you do not need an emergency proclamation to take precautions.
Well, those tensions with Russia have sent a shockwave through the world's global economy. Our Howard Dykes had a chat with an economist this morning on Sunrise about how they're impacting the local economy here in the islands and how some other factors are playing into the outlook.
Dr. Eugene Tian is in the Analysis Division of the Department of Business, Economic Development and Tourism, which has issued a revised forecast. It now expects a little more economic growth this year. Instead of 3%, 3.2%. Dr. Tian, what new data leads you to expect a somewhat greater growth rate?
Yes, the data we have seen is that the state has a very strong demand in terms of sales. Retail sale, wholesale has been increasing since March 2021. We actually see a double-digit increase in the general excise tax. For the first month of 2022, we actually see a 16% increase in the general excise tax. So those strong demand made us feel that the economy is going to grow stronger than we previously expected.
Does the report contain anything related to the global economic impact of Ukraine, or is it too soon?
Yes, we included mainly in the inflation projection. The consumer inflation we projected for this year, 2022, will be 4.8%, which is an increase by about 1 percentage point. This will be the effect of the Ukraine war is because Hawaii imported about 30%, to be exact, is about 26.6% of oil from Russia in 2021.
Right.
I think the increase in the oil price will impact the inflation.
Hard to measure inflation, and there are a lot of different numbers. As you know, the Consumer Price Index, the most recent figure that's been made public, shows a 12-month increase of 6%. What do you think inflation is doing right now? Is 6% close to the target, or do you think it's already less than that?
I think the 6% for the U.S. actually is 7.5% in January.
Right.
Hawaii was 6%, and last year the state inflation was about 3.8%. And we feel that the inflation will be. We are talking about the whole year. I think in the next few months, I think Federal Reserve Bank will do some measures in terms of increasing interest rate, will help to leverage the inflation. So overall, the inflation will be higher than last year for sure, but it may not be reached to 6%. So our projection is 4.8%.
Okay, Dr. Eugene Tian is the chief forecaster for the official forecast that the state of Hawaii puts out at a really hard time to measure all this stuff, so we appreciate your time.
Now to the pandemic. The state health department is reporting 7 more COVID-related fatalities today, along with 166 new infections. The breakdown of cases includes 83 on Oahu, 24 on the Big Island, 21 on Maui, and 11 on Kauai. The White House just unveiled President Biden's new COVID-19 response strategy. Danya Bacchus has those developments.
2 years into the COVID-19 pandemic, the White House says it has a new plan to get Americans back to a more normal routine.
We are clearly going in the right direction.
The White House COVID-19 response team detailed President Biden's strategy to protect against and treat the virus in the months ahead, including access to testing and treatment in one stop.
Hundreds of one-stop sites will open across the country this month, located at local pharmacy clinics, community health centers, long-term care facilities, and veterans health centers.
The 96-page plan, which would require funding from Congress, describes how to avoid business and school shutdowns, battle the virus abroad, and prepare for new variants.
These expedited plans and processes will help us reach our goal that updated vaccines can be developed, approved, and manufactured in approximately 100 days.
With COVID cases and hospitalizations dropping nationwide, Los Angeles County is expected to drop its indoor mask mandate Friday, meaning businesses would no longer need to check vaccine cards.
It's about time they lift it. I'm going to continue to wear a mask for my safety.
In Philadelphia, masks are no longer required in most indoor settings, and New York State eliminated its mask mandate for public schools.
It's very exciting because we get to see each other's faces.
Face masks are still required on public transportation, including air travel. Officials plan to review the federal transportation mandate, which is set to expire March 18th. Danya Bacchus, CBS News, Los Angeles.
So today you're probably going to see a lot of people with those ash crosses on their forehead, and that's because millions of Christians around the world are celebrating Ash Wednesday today to mark the start of Lent. Now, John, what else should we know about Ash Wednesday?
Well, I went to Catholic grade school, so I'm pretty familiar with this day, but not all these facts. So, while Ash Wednesday is pretty closely associated with Catholicism, other religions also take part in it and recognize it, including Lutherans, Methodists, Presbyterians, and Baptists. The ashes used on Ash Wednesday are meant to represent dust. When receiving ashes on the foreheads, parishioners hear the words, "Remember you are dust, and to dust you shall return." This is in reference to what God says to Adam while in being exiled from the Garden of Eden. The Bible never mentioned the Ash Wednesday holiday in any reference, but the book of Daniel says it does have some links to fasting to ashes, which some scholars say that might be the origin of the practice.
Right, and Ash Wednesday looks different in other parts of the world, right?
Yeah, I got these pictures to show you, and this is Iceland. Looks sort of familiar to a holiday we celebrate here, right?
Halloween.
Yeah, so on Tuesday before Ash Wednesday, that's really a time for partying and celebration. Think Mardi Gras. So this is what Iceland does. It's so much like Halloween. They dress up and take part in candy gatherings with kids. They also carry these little sacks. You'll see one in that other picture that just flowed through. They're supposed to be filled with ash, but they use grains now. And it's sort of like a little bit of mischief you can do with your friends. You secretly sort of stick it to their back, and sort of like a kick me sign is the tradition. I don't really fully understand that. That's the tradition that I read about this morning. Pretty interesting stuff. The more you know, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thanks for that.
Yeah. My nuns in Catholic school would be very happy for me right now.
If they're watching.
Yes. Please be watching, Miss Johnson. All right, taking you live outside.
Oh, wow.
Look at this shot of the Golden Gate Bridge from KGO in San Francisco. 66 degrees there now. It's 80 degrees here in the islands, here in the airport. I want to turn it over to Guy Hoggy, who has more on some developing chances of rain.
So the Big Island in Maui likely to get some showers later today. And then some trailing moisture going to come into Kauai and Oahu later. We're talking by tonight and tomorrow. So tomorrow is the day when we're expecting more widespread showers on the east side as well as the west side. And then so tomorrow we could even see some spotty thunderstorms. But by Friday, that moisture should be gone, drier for the weekend. But the early part of next week, another disturbance drops in with more scattered showers through Tuesday. So it's going to be a little damp the early part of next week. So enjoy the weekend. Until then, though, we got to get through some wet weather tonight and tomorrow, slowly drying up by Friday. Also notice the winds will remain rather slow. And because of that, we'll likely see some overnight cool temperatures. And we'll also see maybe a buildup of fog and haze for some parts of the state. So get those umbrellas out. You'll need them tonight and tomorrow, and to some extent into next week.
All right.
Oh, sorry, Ashley. Well, if you haven't seen this video yet, you got to see it. And we're so excited about it. We're talking over each other.
Yeah, so Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson visited the Honolulu Zoo yesterday, and most people would be super excited to see the superstar, but one primate could care less. Check it out.
Go for a walk. Tell means too much talk. I love Fayette or means I love you. Take it easy means Silent Moon.
Yeah, she hates it. She hates it, guys.
So that little brown blob over there, that was Violet the orangutan, and maybe she was afraid of DJ or just not into the singing. Well, The Rock brought his mom, wife, and 2 daughters to the zoo, and he thanked the staff there for letting his family see all the animals and that they could learn about them. Now, in his Instagram post, he added, "The primates get one look at me, and they think we're related."
And the young Rock coming back to KHNL very soon. Very cool. All right, guys, good news now. The world's largest puppet was unveiled yesterday in Los Angeles. Everybody loves puppets. Here's what happened.
I think she's here!
Yeah, that's what.
Wait, that's a puppet?
That's a puppet, and it comes from Jim Henson's Creature Shop, and it was made for the San Diego Children's Zoo, even though it was unveiled in Los Angeles. It's Percy the porcupine.
Aww.
Has over 2,000 quills, weighs over a ton. Yep, over 40 feet in circumference.
So just hangs out in that
Yeah,
thing.
I don't know whose hand's that big, really. Jim Henson, amazing guy. And I know he's passed away, but his name lives on. You guys, that's going to do it for This Is Now. Ashley's going to be back first at 4 on KHNL with all the news updates from throughout the day. Have a great afternoon.